The media often pushes the narrative that once you've hit 30, that you're quote-unquote over the hill, where society questions what you've accomplished so far in your life. And this sort of narrative creates the illusion that youth is the ultimate goal, subtly suggesting that life loses all meaning after you hit the milestone of 30. And you can see this in pop culture and mainstream media, glorifying youth, where there's a huge focus on the beauty, youthful energy, and freedom of being in our 20s. I mean, I'm 22 at the time of making this video, and I know for a fact that if you're also in your 20s, or even younger, the idea of being 30 seems like it's ages away. Almost like an unlockable character in a game that's grayed out at the moment. And I will admit, I might not fully grasp the idea of being 30, and I don't claim to be an authority in this topic. But I do know for a fact that this idea of getting older is something that a lot of us think about, no matter our age. And marketers especially are well aware of our fear of losing our 20s, and they tap into our insecurities on getting older, which is why they end up pushing products such as anti-aging creams and Botoxes and even self-help products to try and fight aging. But all this messaging ever does is it deepens people's fear on aging, making it harder to accept and embrace the natural process of getting older. And this social stigma around aging is tough to escape. Even admitting to yourself that you're old can feel shameful in this day and age, almost like it's something to hide or deny. And this fear-driven narrative traps us in a cycle of comparing ourselves to the younger versions of who we once were, or even those who seem to be thriving in their youth. Now, I also want to focus on whether this fear of turning 30 is dictated and driven by biology or culture, since so far I've only mentioned the cultural side of things. And yes, there is a valid argument to be made that our bodies may not be as capable as we age from a biological standpoint. And humans are wired to be aware of their youth and vitality, which is strongly linked to our survival and reproduction. And this fear of aging is, in part, an instinctual response to the body's perceived decline. But I do think that this way of thinking is a bit outdated in modern times. Thanks to medical advancements with birth control and changing societal norms, people are living longer and reproducing much later in life. And what was once seen as a decline is now more manageable, as life stages have become a lot more flexible. Now, when we look at the cultural side of things, this fear of aging is only amplified. As I mentioned earlier, our society tends to glorify youth and beauty, especially in a capitalistic culture where aging is often framed as something to fear or avoided altogether. And these cultural narratives feed into our biological fears, creating a negative feedback loop. So the fear of turning 30 isn't just about the physical aspects of aging, but it's also losing societal relevance, which could trigger deeper internal anxiety. And this mindset leads us to believe that our 20s are the prime of our lives. But we first have to take a step back and question, what does being in our prime actually mean? For some, the 20s might be about partying every weekend and living spontaneously. For others, it could be focusing on building their career and focusing on personal growth. The problem is, this one-size-fits-all narrative pushes us to live up to an idealized version of what our 20s should look like, a version which is often unrealistic and unsustainable. As a result, many people feel like they're failing if their experience doesn't align with the glossy, Instagram perfect lifestyle which they've been bombarded with on social media. And this can be especially discouraging when faced with real life challenges, with financial stress, career instability, relationship struggles, and even mental health issues, which is very common for those navigating our 20s. But what if we stopped viewing our 20s as our prime, but instead embrace our 20s for what they really are, which is a messy transformation period of growth? And there is this unspoken pressure to hit certain checkpoints in life, almost like a checklist, from having a stable career to starting a family. But in my humble opinion, these milestones are arbitrary and a bit outdated in modern times. And thinking this way creates unnecessary stress, almost like falling behind in a race that you didn't even agree to run. It's honestly an exhausting mindset that keeps people chasing ideals which may not even align with their own personal goals or values. And the truth is, life itself is anything but linear, even though we like to assume that it is, as we like imposing these sort of structures, if you will, in our daily lives, from planning our careers to following a certain fitness routine, to make us feel like we're in control of our own lives. But life doesn't work that way. Life is so unpredictable, which can throw curveballs at us, which can completely change the trajectory of our life. And I would argue that our life is less like a straight line, and more like a collection of moments. And these moments, not the big milestones, are what makes our lives more meaningful. But unfortunately, people who are 30 and above still have this belief that life should follow this set linear path. And it's just interesting to me when looking back at history and seeing how different aging was viewed. Because if we look at history, the elderly are treated a lot different to how they're treated nowadays. As old age back then, say in the Greek or Roman times, were associated with power, wisdom, and respect. Even during the Middle Ages, where religion and spirituality played more of a prominent role in society, aging was more viewed in the spiritual lens. Almost like the last and final meeting before you meet God and the whole afterlife. And their opinions when it came to decision making were highly valued, since getting to that old age was quite special and rare. Because in the past, the life expectancy back then was around 30 or 40 years. So getting to 30 and beyond was quite significant. And during the Renaissance period was a renewed interest on humanism, which emphasized on the potential of an individual and human life. And some well-known examples during this time period would be individuals such as Leonardo da Vinci and even Michelangelo, who worked well into their old age, essentially demonstrating that aging didn't necessarily have to mean decline. Now fast forward to the present moment, and you yourself can probably feel the shift in how aging is perceived. Something which has turned into more of a liability than a strength, which has caused further issues and deepened the divide between our generations. Since the younger generation often blame the boomers, for instance, for the challenges of the modern day, such as student debt, unaffordable housing, and the climate crisis, just to name a few. And this resentment often carries an unconscious level of disrespect, often fueled by the belief that the older generation had it easier. And their carefree attitude, as well as this mindset of ignorance being bliss, probably doesn't help their case either. It's almost like a perceived betrayal, as if the older generation thrived under rules which no longer apply. And I get it, because I've seen this exact behavior in myself. But once I started to analyze this deep feeling of resentment, I started to get a deeper realization that it's not actually their fault. And the truth is, everyone, no matter their age, will have to let go of looking young and become old at some point. And sure, there is an argument to be made that aging works a little bit differently depending on your genetics, your gender, or even your lifestyle habits. But it's still quite limited. And at the end of the day, even the most beautiful person will have to tolerate aging and practice self-acceptance at some point, if they truly want to be happy. And while this process may initially feel like a loss of control, it's also an opportunity for you to reevaluate your values and what truly matters in life. I appreciate you watching the video, and if you're so interested, you can check out one of the videos that are popping up on screen right now.